So, there are a few things about the readings today that kind of dovetail with the election of Pope Leo XIV in a way that I think is kind of intriguing. As a native of Chicago myself, I have it on good authority that it is going to be declared a mortal sin to use ketchup on a hot dog. And I have to say, I'm kind of excited. So there are, as Abraham Lincoln was fond of saying, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. You have to be a little bit careful. The gospel text that we have for today also follows a little bit in the tradition of the reading that we had last week, which is the tradition of very poor English translations and losing what's going on. If you'll recall from last week, the text used the word love repeatedly. And in Greek, there were two different words that set up the entire point of the text that are simply translated as love, and you miss it. Today's word that we lose is the word Messiah. Now, the word Messiah is best translated as Messiah. However, we have a sense in our time and place of what Messiah means. Most of the time, if we think about the word Messiah, we would in our heads translate that as maybe Pope. It'd say, this is the religious leader of our tradition, right? The one who is going to make all things new. This is what it means. And the answer to that is no, that's not at all what that means. Let's go back to the text that we have today. We're in the season of Easter, but this lesson comes from before the events of Holy Week and Easter. Jesus in the temple, I love the way they say it's winter, like, 10 feet of snow, 30 below. But Jesus is walking in the portico there, teaching, and people come up to him and say, "Why are you keeping us in suspense? Tell us plainly if you are the Messiah," right? Let's say it a little differently. Why are you keeping us in suspense? When are you going to tell us if you are going to lead the uprising to overthrow Rome? Oh, well, now that sounds a little different, right? It starts to sound a little different. So when you get to Holy Week and wonder, well, why was he killed? He was killed because he was the Messiah, but not Pope. That wasn't what that meant. Now, Jesus is wrestling with getting pegged into a certain definition of what it means to be Messiah. Everybody wants Jesus to be their guy, right? They want to kind of box him into how this is going to look, how this is going to work. And Jesus says something kind of interesting. And he says it in this kind of cryptic sort of way in multiple places. Jesus is also fond of answering a question with a question, like he does, as a good rabbi would do, a good teacher. When he's dragged in front of Pontius Pilate asks him, "They say you're a king, are you?" And he responds with that definitive, "You say that I am." That was a yes or no question. And you didn't give me a yes or no answer. In today's text, he responds by saying, "Have you seen what I have been doing?" Have you seen what I have been doing? Well, what has Jesus been doing? He has been healing the sick, causing the lame to walk, giving sight to the blind. He is feeding the hungry. He is hanging out and eating with all of the people that the religious leaders say, don't do that. And he does it. He speaks with women in public. You don't do that. All kinds of social norms shattered. Jesus working at the outskirts of society with those who are broken and excluded and hurting. Have you been watching what I have been doing? Jesus, in effect, is saying, yes, Messiah. No, not Crusader. Let me show you what it means to be the Messiah. We have an interesting juxtaposition here because with the election of Pope Leo XIV this last week, we have a similar sort of circumstance going on where people are looking at the election and desperately, particularly in the United States, wanting to land him in a certain frame. Is he our guy or is he their guy? And I think Pope Leo would say, yes. Yes. I suspect many people will have all kinds of things to be thrilled with and disappointed. And it will not be the same list for any single person. This idea that we want to package it in such a way where Jesus and the message of the gospel reinforces our sense of our own rightness and goodness and reinforces the wrong and evil in them. But I think Jesus in the gospel says, you know, I hear what you're saying, but there are a few things about you that I want to talk about first. Oh, okay. I don't want that so much, but here we are. When we look at the readings that we have for today as well, there's another aspect that I find fascinating in this season. The first reading often comes from what traditionally is referred to as the Old Testament. Think of an Old Testament reading here. But during this season, those readings universally come from the book of Acts in the New Testament. We get glimpses of the earliest days of the church, the very earliest days of those who are following Jesus, where Jesus is no longer with them physically the way they were used to having him around. And what was that like? We get Peter, he's dragged over to Joppa. And like a lot of names of very old places, particularly in parts of the world where the languages spoken are very distant from the ones that we speak, we hear about Joppa. Sometimes it's called Jaffa today. Or if you look it up on your phone on the map, you will find that it is Tel Aviv-Yafo. It is the ancient port of the Holy Land. And it is a place where numerous pilgrims and others have gone to. Mark Twain actually has a lovely reminiscence of his adventures in landing at Jaffa. For centuries in Western Europe, that is where you got your oranges. It's from Jaffa. If we think about the story that we have here, Peter is stepping into the role of what the Messiah is doing. We might hear echoes from the gospel where Jesus is saying, are you watching what I'm doing? That will tell you what we're about. And what does Peter do? Effectively the same thing, right? Watch me. Watch me. And we hear about this amazing miracle with Tabitha. Now, when we think of the image of that resurrection, we think of the image of this woman and the good ministry that she did. There's so much detail for something that happens 2,000 years ago. She made clothes, people coming in and showing the work that she had done. I'm immediately thinking of the hundreds upon hundreds of Lutheran churches across the United States where people are busily making quilts to send to Lutheran World Relief around the world. It is the same work. We have been doing this for 2,000 years. We welcome the refugee. We engage in medical services that people might be made whole when they are hurting. We feed those who are hungry. When there is a disaster, Lutherans are there, Christians are there. Is it radically different from what Jesus did? I hope not. That's the gig. What does it mean to follow the Messiah? It means to do the things that the Messiah did, to heal, to feed, to teach. One of the enduring images of Pope Leo XIV after his election that really struck me was him after a disaster in a rural village in Peru, standing up to his knees in floodwaters. That is where the church is called to be. That is the work that we are called to be about as Christians. When we leave this space past the baptismal font, when we hear the words, "Go in peace, serve the Lord," and we say, "Thanks be to God," what is that service? It is what Jesus did when he said, "Have you been watching? Let's watch. Let's listen. Let's go and do." Amen.